Every region of the Earth has been photographed in incredible detail by high-powered satellites, and now millions of people can use apps like Google Maps to find their way around the world. Sometimes people using Google Maps find unusual things like secret military bases, religious compounds, and mysterious symbols. Join me for today's video as we take a look at 15 secret things found in Google Maps. Number 15. Courtyard of the Orange Tree. While Google has high-resolution images of almost everywhere on Earth, the company works in conjunction with governments around the world to obscure facilities that are deemed too sensitive for the public to see. Strangely though, this extends to places that, officially at least, aren't classified as top secret, and there's a courtyard in Spain that falls into this category. Known as the Patio Los Naranjos, which translates to mean the Courtyard of the Oranges, is in the city of Cordoba, and it's generally regarded as being the oldest garden in all of Europe. Its origins can be traced back to the 8th century as part of the construction of a mosque on the site, and within a few hundred years it was the most populated city on the planet. Now covered with orange trees and cypresses, as well as fountains and various other structures, you won't be able to see how beautiful it is from Google because the entire square is blurred out. The reason for this is unclear, but there have been suggestions that there may be secret institutions somewhere around the perimeter, or even hidden beneath the surface. This is speculation, of course, but if officials have gone so far as to having images blocked of the place, then there's surely more going on here than is immediately apparent. Number 14. Scientologist Cathedral and Landing Pads. Deep in a remote part of the desert in New Mexico, there are two strange diamond-shaped markings surrounded by circles, a couple of structures, and an unusual road that connects them with a nearby airfield. This facility was built in the late 1980s, and for a long time, most of the world had no idea it was there. That was, of course, until Google Maps revealed it. This is known as Trementina Base, and it's owned by the Church of Spiritual Technology that's affiliated with the Church of Scientology. According to the church, the site was created to provide storage space where the writings, films, and recordings of L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, are being preserved for future generations. But there are suspicions that there may be far more to the facility than just this. The two circles with diamonds are believed to be markers that will allow followers to find their way back home after humanity has been destroyed in the future, and that the vast network of vaults hidden beneath the structures actually contain everything that do manage to return will need to survive. With a nearby private airfield, who knows what the organization has been able to fly in and store there, and with the financial muscle that the church has, there are suspicions that it could be one of the biggest storage spaces for valuable artworks and historical artifacts anywhere on the planet. Number 13. Strange Chinese Symbols. Hobbyists looking at images of Google Maps found something very strange in the Gobi Desert in China, a series of lines and patterns. They're in the middle of nowhere, and while they may look like the types of carvings that were often done by ancient cultures in an attempt to communicate with the higher powers of their beliefs, these were created much more recently, but in a way, for exactly the same purpose. They're scattered all over the desert and measure about 0.6 miles or about a kilometer wide and 1.1 miles or 1.8 kilometers long. Experts believe that these are calibration patterns that are used to help China's spy satellites orient themselves in space and focus their cameras. Rather than being made of a reflective material like it may seem, they're actually grooves that have been dug and then painted. When these images first became publicly shared, those who work in the field of satellites noted that they were surprisingly large, which does suggest that China's satellites have much poorer ground resolution than those operated by other countries, or even Google itself. Similar structures can be seen elsewhere in the world, like Arizona, but with the way that China's technology is improving far faster than anywhere else, it's likely they'll have caught up within just a matter of years. Number 12. The Blood Lake. There are a number of lakes around the world that, instead of being blue or green like you may expect, occasionally develop a red or pinkish hue. This is normally because of the presence of a particular type of microorganism that creates the coloration, but there's a mysterious lake in Iraq where this isn't the case. Known as the Blood Lake, it's just outside of Sadr City. The depth of its redness changes throughout the year, and depending on when you look at Google Maps and when it's most recently been updated, you'll either see a blood red coloration or a faint red one. There have been a number of theories as to why this is happening, such as a tradition where the local butchers would drain the blood and offcut into the water. But the lake is so large that huge volumes of material would have been dumped into it each day to maintain that phenomenon. While it's seen as unlikely to be the result of algae, just as the case is elsewhere, the most likely answer is believed that the lake is used for the disposal of waste products from a local chemical plant, meaning this is one place you definitely don't want to go for a swim. Number 11. Orano-La Hague. Orano-La Hague is a site that's operated by the French nuclear company Orano, and it's used to reprocess nuclear fuel. If you try to look at it on Google Maps, you'll notice that the entire complex is blurred out, and this is believed to be the result of an agreement between the company and the French government to prevent important secrets from becoming widely available. What we do know about the place is that it has around half of the world's total light water reactor fuel reprocessing capacity and can handle around 2,000 tons of waste material per year. First opened in 1976, plutonium is extracted from the spent fuel and then sent to another facility where it's turned into mixed oxide fuel and then can be used for the majority of nuclear reactors. The site takes material from France, Japan, Germany, Belgium, Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands, and any waste material that remains after the process is then sent back to the country that it originated in. While this may seem like a noble cause, Greenpeace claims that the site is responsible for dumping 1 million liters of radioactive waste per day into the ocean, which is the equivalent of 50 barrels of waste, and they've called for it to be shut down. The environmental concerns and the likelihood that it could be a target for protesters is the most likely reason why Google has agreed to limit how much information about the layout is available to its users. Number 10. The Badlands Guardian. If you spend enough time scouring the planet through Google Earth, there's a good chance you'll spot an unusual feature that no one else has ever seen before. That's what happened to Lynn Hickox in 2005, which led to the discovery of a natural formation in Alberta, Canada, that looks just like a human head wearing an indigenous style of headdress. People have had a natural affinity for seeing human shapes in objects, such as faces and potato chips, but there's no denying that this particular structure has a human face quality to it. Now known as the Badlands Guardian, this wasn't formed at all by any kind of human modification, with the exception of a road that was built and it's said to give the impression that the figure is wearing earphones. Instead, the head is made up of a drainage feature from the local water system, whereby the clay-rich soil has been eroded by wind and water. Amazingly, even though it looks like it's sticking out of the ground and is convex, it's actually a concave valley and is at least several hundred years old. Number 9. Jeannette Island. Located in the East Siberian Sea as part of the De Long Island archipelago, Jeannette Island is around 1.2 miles or 2 kilometers long and covers an area of approximately 1.3 square miles or about 3.3 square kilometers. For most of the year, it's almost entirely covered with an ice cap, and it was first accidentally discovered by a research vessel in 1881 that had become trapped in the surrounding sea ice. But because of its remoteness and inhospitable environment, no permanent communities have ever been established there. It's strange then that for some reason Google Maps has blurred the image of the island. It shows as either a white ice-like mound with no discernible features, or instead it's simply blacked out. This has led to a number of theories of why this may be, such as the presence of a secret military base or an ancient structure that's still not fully understood. What we do know, though, is that the territory is part of the Republic of Sakha, so it's considered to be Russian. But while this is officially recognized by the US government, there are some factions that claim the archipelago as a US territory. Could the blackout simply be because Google sees it as disputed? And why would any US officials even want to possess any land that's in such an inaccessible place? There surely is more to Jeannette Island than it initially seems. Number 8. Giant Pentagram. On an isolated corner of Kazakhstan, set on the southern shore of the Upper Tobol Reservoir, Google Maps detectives uncovered an extremely unusual feature that's been carved into the ground. This is a region that's a long way from any human settlements, both current and historical, but for some reason there's a huge pentagram that measures around 1,200 feet or 300 meters in diameter. From the moment it was first discovered, there have been countless suggestions of its true nature, from some form of satanic ritual to it being a symbol that was created by ancient society that saw particular importance of this specific site. In recent years, though, a Kazakh archaeologist has put forward what's most likely to be the true origin. As well as being important in a number of religions and belief systems, the pentagram was also a popular symbol in the Soviet Union, of which Kazakhstan was part of. This star shape was therefore most likely the boundary of a lakeside park that was built several decades ago, and as trees have begun to grow alongside the roads and pathways, the overall shape of the star has become far more pronounced. Number 7. Sandy Island. Before satellites, maps were usually produced by combining records that had been collected by explorers and taking artistic license to improve upon the maps that had been drawn before. This gave people an incredible insight into how the landmasses of the world were laid out, but without visual evidence of features, there were countless mistakes. When you add to this the fact that some regions were so rarely visited that any errors would take years to check, and that some map makers would add in fake places in order to catch other companies who had copied their work, you can see why Google's satellite maps were such a game changer. The problem, though, is that when Google first launched the service, it didn't have imagery of everywhere and so relied on previously drawn maps. This led to one of the most famous mistakes, which was the inclusion of Sandy Island in the eastern Coral Sea, which seemed to have never existed despite featuring on most world maps of the past century. In November of 2012, the RV Southern Surveyor was able to pass through the region and undiscover it, which led to it being removed from Google. But still, to this day, a dark region is shown where it once was, in honor of the history of cartography and because of the potential that there may actually be an island there, but one that's usually covered with water. Number 6. Desert Breath. Deep in the Egyptian desert, near to the resort city of Hurghada, there's a strange structure in the sand that you can hardly even tell is there from ground level, but looks amazing on Google Maps. Known as Desert Breath, this is actually an artwork that was created in 1997 by a team of 3 Greek artists, and it's intended to show the transient nature of life and existence. Covering an area of around 25 acres, it was made up of 89 protruding cones and 89 depressed cones that were arranged in a double spiral formation. Sand removed for the depressed cones was used to build the raised ones, and in total they displace around 10,000 cubic yards, or about 8,000 cubic meters of material. In the center, there was a 98-foot or 30-meter wide pool of water, but since it was first created, the purpose of this artwork has become more and more apparent. To begin with, the water evaporated and the sand structures continued to erode, with the depressions slowly filling in. Every year, the work becomes harder and harder to see, and within the decade, it's expected that there will be no sign left that it even existed at all. Number 5. The Hexagonal Warehouses. Around 100 miles or 160 kilometers to the southeast of Moscow in Russia, there used to be a region that was mysteriously blurred out on Google Maps. In 2021, however, researchers discovered that it was now completely visible, but this just raised more questions than it answered. On the plot of land, which is surrounded by dense woodland, there's what appears to be an almost hexagonally shaped perimeter wall, and inside is a series of buildings or warehouses. The fact that it used to be blurred would suggest that it was classed as a top-secret military compound, but the design of it is unlike any other publicly known military site. There's a road that leads to it and checkpoints to ensure only authorized personnel can make it that far, and the forest around it provides excellent defense from anyone trying to sneak up from another direction. The way the buildings are spaced out is unusual too, and this may reveal the purpose of the site. Experts think that the most likely explanation is the site being used to store highly explosive materials or weapons, and it's set up like that to ensure that if one of the warehouses were to ignite, it wouldn't set off a chain reaction that would destroy the whole facility and potentially large areas of surrounding forest. Number 4. Amchitka Island. Located in the Rat Islands group of the Aleutian Islands, which are off the coast of Alaska, Amchitka Island is a particularly mysterious place. If you try to look at it on Google Maps, you'll see that half of the island is just about viewable, while the other half is blurred. And the more you look around, the more it'll become clear that you're not seeing the true images of what the place is like. The reason for this is that Amchitka Island is a highly classified location that was originally inhabited for more than 2,500 years by the Aleut people. The last permanent population left in 1832, which was 35 years before it became a part of the United States, and it was used as an air base during the Second World War. After this, it was selected as a nuclear test site where several experimental weapons were detonated underground, including Kanikin in 1971, which was 5 megatons and was the largest subterranean test ever carried out by the United States. Amid fears of earthquakes and tsunamis, testing ended on the island, but it's still continuously monitored for radiation. The government doesn't want anyone to venture anywhere near it, both for their safety and the chance that sensitive material may still be accessible there, so high-resolution images aren't allowed. Eventually, though, this will be undone, and it's hoped that by 2025 it'll become a restricted access wildlife preserve. Number 3. GROM Headquarters. If you look at Google imagery of Krakow in Poland, you'll see the crisp, high-resolution pictures of the city just like you'd expect elsewhere. There's a large region, though, that's suspiciously blurry. Not because the satellites just so happen to forget to image it, but because it's one of the most secretive sites in the whole of Europe. It's the headquarters of GROM, which is a Polish Special Forces unit that's part of the Special Troops Command of the country's army. First established in 1990, GROM is at the forefront of anti-terror and special operations campaigns, which, with Poland's geographical location near to the former Soviet states and Russia, puts them in an extremely important strategic position. It's no surprise then that officials have ensured that there's no public access to imagery of the headquarters, and while foreign states would be able to capture imagery from their own spy satellites, it reduces the chance of any civilians from deciding to act on their own against the facility. Number 2. Christian Science Society of Dixon. Religious organizations are able to raise large amounts from their followers and are meant to use these to further their cause and to provide spaces where their congregation can meet. It's thought that around 3,000 new churches open in the U.S. each year, and while the total number is falling because around 4,000 close annually, the new ones are often very different from what you may think of a church being like. This has never been more true than in 2013, when the Christian Science Society Church opened their new venue in Dixon, Illinois. At first, their congregation were extremely happy with the new building, especially as the design had been created specifically to work around an existing oak tree instead of removing it. The whole building was facing south to reduce energy needs, and they were so proud of it that it opened with a ceremony and the motto, "Rising Up." This turned out to be unfortunate though, because soon after locals saw the first image of what the church looked like from above. Rather than being an innocuous structure, it instead took on the shape of something less appropriate. It is, of course, hilarious that the officials managed to sign off on a building in the shape of a male appendage without realizing, and by the time they knew it, it was far too late. The architects deny that it was done on purpose, and that it was just a coincidence based on the requirements the church had for the structure. Do you believe them? I don't think I do. Number 1. China. Possibly the biggest secret hidden within Google Maps doesn't relate to one specific place, but an entire country. If you've ever tried to use the service to look at images of China, then you may have successfully seen some of the popular sites and attractions. But the moment you try to overlay road networks for navigation or try to do anything practical, then you'll quickly become stuck. It's a well-known fact in Beijing, if you order an Uber-like service, the driver will call to ask where you are instead of relying on the map, and you'll often find that you're not actually anywhere near where you think you are, and it could be a block in the other direction. If you look closer, you'll see that roads seem to pass through buildings or lead to nowhere, and this is all the result of a policy by the Chinese government. Instead of using the same standards for GPS as the rest of the world, China instead chose to go with a system that was designed during the Cold War to confuse foreign intelligence agencies. Officially known as GCJ02 datum, but often known as Mars coordinates, it means that all mapping products have to be under the control of the government, otherwise they simply won't work as intended. If you visit China, you may also notice the same rules affecting how geotagging works on digital photographs and the complete lack of crowdsourced mapping apps. It's all because in China, law has made restrictions to safeguard security of China's geographical information, which is, in essence, to make it even more difficult for enemies to plan an action against them, no matter how inconvenient it may be for citizens. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.